We are on our way to explore Cuba, focusing on meeting the people as well as seeing the birds. We plan to cover a good part of the island. Our leaders are Sally and Drew from BirdNote, David from Vent, Angel from International Expeditions, and our Cuban guide Gustavo. It seems like the sounds of Cuba are with us from the time we get off the plane. And it doesn't take long for everyone in the group to join in the party. One of the first things we notice are the roads, some for pedestrians only, others that should have been for pedestrians only, and some roads that only birders could enjoy. Some are wide and modern, and some are very narrow. And everywhere there is great diversity in the types of transportation. From very new to very old. We even find one of the first types of wagons used in agriculture, known as the sled. It featured simplicity of construction and ability to haul all sorts of loads, even university professors on sabbatical. "35 million years ago, Cuba was a series of large mountains separated by shallow seas. Marine organisms in these seas fractured and precipitated out, which formed limestone. Then 5 million years ago, Cuba emerged as a single landmass, and limestones of various types covers about 2/3 of the island. These dramatic steep-sided hills are called mogotes and are comprised mainly of limestone. It's no wonder the predominance of stone in the buildings, be they modern or old. And in the old buildings, the connection back to marine organisms can be very evident. Wherever we go in Cuba, we are reminded who the leaders and heroes of the country are. Castro called on the people to fight for a free country or die. A billboard at the Bay of Pigs shows him successfully defending the country from an American invasion. The government-owned museums feature images and artwork of their heroes and tell the story of the revolution and the attempted invasion at the Bay of Pigs from their perspective. On display was also the tail section of a North American bomber that was shot down with a U.S. pilot on board. The heroes of Cuba also include figures from their earlier history, as well as people such as Abraham Lincoln, Martin Luther King, and Ernest Hemingway. Images of Che Guevara and an older Fidel Castro appear on the government buildings in Havana's Revolution Square. Well, what do the people think? Public opinion is not simple and probably varies greatly, but the one thing they can agree on is they want the blockade to end. But Cuba is changing. Citizens are now being allowed to have private businesses.
And notice also the presence of a big number of paladares, privately owned restaurants. Look at the tables and chairs, mostly on the porch of all these houses here.
And these private businesses are taxed to bring much needed money into the government. Sound familiar? Does art imitate life, or does life imitate art? In Cuba, everything is complex, but the people love Americans. Cubans love to engage in art. It has been said that Cubans have the greatest number of artists per capita of anywhere in the world. At an artist studio, we find many fascinating examples of Cuban art.
And here, for sale. For sale. And I keep like 6 to the exhibition in Denver that I'm not able to sell. And also, someone's in the file.
Cuban Trogan.
Very Cuban.
And as much as they engage in art, they also engage in music. As we travel Cuba, we are struck by the many beautiful sounds, not just from the musical groups, but from many of the birds that we are seeing. The Zapata wren, found only on the Zapata Peninsula, has a very interesting, complex song. The national bird is the Cuban trogon, which has the colors of the Cuban flag and a very interesting tropical call. Another bird known for its singing is the Cuban solitaire. But not to be outdone by the birds is the beautiful call of this Havana street vendor.
She wants to tell you something. Money. What a voice. Money, serio, money, money. It's a song about the... Si te queremos el pico divertir, comprame un cucuruchito de maní. Money, money, serio. Money, money, serio, money. Si te queremos el pico divertir.
Cuba cares for its children with a complete health care system and a comprehensive government education program, which has resulted in the highest literacy rate in Latin America, near 100%. In addition to the normal school years, early education, while not required, is organized by the government using community, church, and private resources, with 98% of that group attending, starting at age
1 year old when they start to walk. They know how to walk themselves. Until 5 years old. We have some special classes like mother tongue, just to learn.
The young of the various bird species are well cared for too, such as this Cuban green woodpecker. There are less obvious nest locations too that require one to be very vigilant or that will be missed. One of Cuba's prized birds to see is, at 2 inches, the smallest bird in the world. Its egg is the size of a coffee bean. Formerly the Cuban screech owl, the bare-legged owl really blends into its nest cavity. Maybe one of the cutest birds in Cuba is the Cuban pygmy owl, seemingly ready for politics since it is two-faced. I've slowed down the flight of the great lizard cuckoo so one can better enjoy its gliding characteristics. Another bird that's fun to watch is the brown pelican, especially the way they plunge dive, beak first, into the water to catch the little fish. As we prepare to leave Cuba, we take back memories, not only of the birds, but of a complex island nation whose well-educated people have creatively adapted to a restrictive government. How they change, and change is coming, and develop remains to be seen. But it certainly is a land with people who know how to share their love and joy for life.